Very simply, and I didn't used to say this, 2-3 weeks ago I wouldn't say it, but I think I can say it now because I've seen so many people. We have such amazing people in this country. Smart, sharp, energetic, they're amazing. I was saying, make America great again. I actually think we can say now, and I really believe this, we're going to get things coming. We're going to get Apple to start building their damn computers and things in this country instead of in other countries. And I honestly think I can say, and I've said it for the last 2 weeks, and I mean it 100%, or I wouldn't say it, we're going to make America great again, greater than ever before. And we can do that. And we're going to win, and we're going to win a lot.
Could Trump's trade policies jack up the price of an iPhone? Trump has said we're going to get Apple to start building their damn computers and things in this country instead of in other countries.
We're going to get Apple to start building their damn computers and things in this country instead of in other countries.
You see? He really said that. But there might be a downside for the small number of Americans who own Apple products. Trump has vowed to slap a tax on Chinese goods, possibly as high as 45%. And the Washington Post reports even a lower tariff at 15% could send the price of an iPhone soaring close to $700. Lou, I think tariff is a fancy word for tax, right?
Correct.
Yes,
absolutely.
Okay. While production of iPhones in China could come to a halt, production of Trump masks in Japan is way up. Since Trump's victory, a Japanese factory has been struggling to keep up with the skyrocketing demand. They've gone from producing roughly 40 masks a day to over 300. Just look at those masks. It's exciting, isn't it? Remy, that's not scary at all, is it?
That's a scary mask. I don't like that mask.
But can you see, I mean, okay, forget about the mask for now. Answer me first on the Apple thing. Would you pay, if the price of an iPhone went up, would you still buy them?
Okay, I don't know the last time any of you went to buy an iPhone or any kind of smartphone. If it's not that time in your contract, that's how much they cost now, $700. So,
or higher.
Yeah, or higher. So I dropped my phone and the screen broke, so my choice was to fix the screen or buy the phone, and the phone was almost $1,000, so I fixed the screen. That's how I know this. But if the price is going to skyrocket, then we're talking about $1,500, $2,000. I'm not sure that the benefit to the American consumer is going to be had. I don't think they're going to pay the tax. I don't think we're going to want to pay for it. I think either the production is going to go somewhere else, as opposed to not America, not China, or we're not going to get the iPhones. We're not going to have access to the kind of products that we do now. So I'm not sure that the 45% tariff is necessarily the best idea.
Well, what's it going to do? Lou, we've been hearing this for years. You know, tariffs have been verboten, right? We can't,
on our side.
Yes, it's almost been a religion on the right, no tariffs, but is the doom and gloom, are what they are saying, is it true? However,
no.
Was that articulate? It wasn't,
well,
but you know what I'm talking about.
I got the gist.
Yeah.
And it is not true. The 45% tariff would be on products that are produced in China that are being sold into this market. What sense does this make? Our middle class has been shrinking for the past quarter century. Net household net worth in this country is now exactly what it was 20 years ago, 1996. Imagine that. The same household net worth for our middle class. We've got to do something, and Trump is exactly right. We've got to manufacture. We have got to be creative. We've got to create jobs, and he's put it straightforwardly. The American dream resides within our middle class. If it's allowed to continue to shrink, that dream is gone. Already, most Americans are saying of their children they're not going to have a better life than we had. And that's the first time in our history that any generation of Americans has said that. That should frighten everyone, irrespective of your politics, your ideology. The reality is we've got to do better for this country, for our middle class, and for future generations.
Well, that makes so much sense, Michael. So what was it? Why did both parties miss this? Why has free trade been the way, and no one, has caught on to this.
I think I agree completely with Lou. I think tariffs, if anything, are an anachronism. I mean, this harkens back to William McKinley. And what happens is just like Flight for 15. When you raise the price of the cost of production, whether it's the employee's salary or the price of making an iPhone, it's poor people who get hurt the most because they're the ones who have to bear the higher cost. So I think this is a terrible idea. This is the worst aspect of Trump's kind of candidacy, because this is actually hurting people in the pocketbook, and it's hurting the people who should be hurt the least, the poor people, the most.
But what about do you like these trade agreements? I don't understand them.
These trade agreements are written by lobbyists on behalf of corporations and screw over everybody else.
So what do you do? If you don't do TPP and you don't do tariffs, what do you do?
Free trade. You don't have to have it through these complicated, in the same way you don't have to have law to have capitalism, you don't have to have these agreements to establish a free market.
I want to get to you, Kevin, but I want to go back to Lou first.
I'm dying over here.
Okay, but Lou, what is it? Where's the middle ground? Like I said, you answer that question. If you don't do these trade agreements and you don't do tariffs, what could you do?
I'm going to quote Donald Trump precisely. Do smart things. And the first thing is not to allow the Chinese or any other company to have tariffs against U.S. goods and enforce them to do so. The only way to do it is with the threat of a tariff, threat of a tax. And by the way, this goes to the issue that he talks a great deal about, which is Mexico, where so many companies, including Ford, are moving plants and production. It's crazy because they're simply arbitraging labor costs. Rather than pay a middle-class working man or woman in this country so that he can or she can provide for their families, the money is going to Mexico, and then the car is dumped into this market based on the lower labor costs. It's outrageous.
I think he keep pointing at me. I'm not Mexican.
I think he was pointing that way.
South.
You're in between.
South. He's pointing south. Yeah.
You're between Lou and Mexico, so you get pointed at. Now, Kevin, you can't stop people from buying these. People say, "Oh, we got to make it in America. We got to
make it in America."
But then they go to Walmart and they buy the cheapest thing there. How do you change people?
What? First of all, make more products here, especially iPhones, because I want my kids to have a summer job.
There you go.
They're 4 and 8, and they should be working. Isn't that
like the Chinese?
Like the Chinese, exactly, Lou. Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to arbitrage this conversation.
Thank the Lord.
Will the iPhone label soon say Made in America? Well, according to one report, opportunities to move production over to the States from China are actually being explored. So joining us now to break this down is Jeremy Kaplan, editor-in-chief at Digital Trends. Jeremy, thanks for joining us today.
As always, thanks for having me.
So back in June, according to this report, this is in the Nikkei Asian Review, Apple asked 2 of its manufacturers, Foxconn and Pegatron, to move its production to America, whether this was even possible. Now, Foxconn agreed. According to this report, Pegatron said no, citing cost concerns. So let's take a look at Apple. How would such a move actually impact Apple?
It's a fascinating question, and I think that the concept of made in the USA is something a lot of people can rally behind. People here in the US, that is. But can it actually happen? Well, the simple answer is yes. It's something that is physically doable, but the reality of it is that it's probably impractical to actually consider, which is why one of those 2 companies you mentioned said we're not even going to posit a scenario where we could do this. I think the first thing to ask about is what would this mean for consumers? And the cost of an iPhone would certainly increase, maybe $100 if it was made in the USA. That's a cost that Apple could readily absorb. Apple makes an incredible profit margin on their products, and they can certainly suck that cost in. But will it happen? I was actually in Korea just 3 weeks ago, and I saw some of the facilities where high-tech products are manufactured, and these are gigantic, enormous plants, one after another. And there's just so much infrastructure in the whole supply chain that the concept of picking it up and putting it in the U.S. is almost hard to fathom. So there's just a lot of logistics behind doing that really make it less practical than one might think.
Yeah, and you bring up some good points there, not the least of which is the idea that it could cost $100 more to manufacture an iPhone in the States. Now, I realize there's a lot of question marks around this, but if you see the new Trump administration come in and actually overhaul the corporate tax code, do things like spur infrastructure investment in the States, could that make this more feasible?
Yes and no. Look, the one thing that I keep thinking about is Apple is reported to have $150 billion parked overseas, right? What if the Trump administration came in and said, we will eliminate all taxation on that, allow you to repatriate those funds if you invest in manufacturing in the U.S. That would create the capital necessary to make this happen. I don't see, so I'm saying even with some changes to tax policy and government policy, there's a great way for this to happen. But what's the benefit for Apple to do this? Apple's a company that's shown us that they are very aware of the bottom line and very cognizant of what makes for good business practices. And it's hard to see what the positive ramification is for Apple beyond the benefits of saying, yes, we make this in the USA, and beyond maybe this being a good thing for American workers. Beyond, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say beyond that, we've heard a lot about the international policy changes that might occur because of this.
Yeah.
The Chinese government doesn't want all of their jobs to flee to the USA. They don't want manufacturing to leave their country. And they have announced some drastic things that they might do if something like this were to happen.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point on that, especially where these trade questions are concerned. But just focusing in on Foxconn specifically, I know you mentioned you were in Asia touring some of these factories in recent weeks. I've actually been to Foxconn's facility, which is just across the U.S. border in Mexico. Foxconn's Apple's biggest customer. So in light of talk about things like potentially tearing up NAFTA, would a move to the States actually impact Foxconn? Would that help it if we were to see trade relations there change?
That's a great point. There's a question of whether we can do it here in the U.S., whether Americans are able to do this type of assembly line work, and I think that they definitely could. But yeah, you're right. Mexico would be affected. China would be affected. A lot of these gigantic international conglomerates like Foxconn would be affected. Han Hai Manufacturing Company in Taiwan. And the supply chain is one that is a global thing, but is centered away from the U.S., over in the Asian markets. So we have, memory chips coming from Korea, and we have glass coming from Japan. We have parts being made in Mexico. And to rejigger all of that involves changes to the shipping chains as well.
Yeah.
There's just so many different ramifications that it becomes such a logistics challenge.
Yeah, and if Apple were to actually start bringing, and I realize, again, there's a lot of pieces in motion. You just laid some of them out. But if you were to see Apple actually bring at least some of its manufacturing back to the States, do you think we would see other American tech companies follow suit?
There's a lot of ifs here, as you're pointing out.
I know.
If Apple were to make some of this happen, and maybe they start by building an assembly plant and just shipping parts here, that could lend to some of the manufacturing coming over here. And if Apple can jumpstart some of that and get some of this going, sure, I think it would be very reasonable for other companies to say, we like to say made in the U.S. as well. I think there's a groundswell of support for that could really occur. But there's, $50 billion worth of investment that has to happen first.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, a lot of ifs here, a lot of money that would potentially be on the line if we were to see changes such as this. Jeremy Kaplan, thank you for laying this out for us. Thank you for watching. I'm Morgan Brennan. Have a great day.